Hi, Heather here for Sew It Yourself, and today we are going to be doing sleep shorts. You will be needing a pattern of some sort. You can use a sleep short pattern. You can use boxers, and then we just don't do the fly front on it. You can use sleep pants and then shorten the pattern so it will work for you. I do not have this as a free pattern just because you can't put pattern things on there. You can just do words. So anyway, I'm cutting out 3, but I'll show you how to put 2 of these together in 2 different ways. So one will be on the sewing machine and one will be with the serger. So depending on which way you want to work, you can check that out, and I'll put the times that each will start at. So if you want to skip the sewing machine one and just go to the serger, that's fine. Whichever. Alright, let's get to it. We're ready to start on our sleep shorts. So all you have to do is find a pattern, and I'll do that as another video in the future, is finding a pattern and how to read a pattern. What I'm using is actually a panel that came out many years ago. It's a VIP panel from Cranston Printworks, and it's basically sleep shorts, and you just cut them out and sew them together. However, I liked the design so much that I have traced it on tracing fabric, which is an option that you have. You can take any pattern and then retrace it, make adjustments if you need to. So I'm doing the large size because they're for my husband. He has worn out of all his sleep shorts, so this is what we're doing. And he has picked out the fabric. He's gone very patriotic. Canadians are not always known for their patriotism, but maybe now that we're 150 years old, maybe we will become a bit more patriotic. I know there's a lot more prints being made that has the Canada prints on it. So I'm actually doing 3 at a time because that's the way I like to roll. Why cut 3 separate ones when you can cut 3 all at the same time? So I'm just layering them up. You'll need 1 meter of fabric to do this project, or 40 inches if you're in America. And then I'm just going to lay my pattern out. Normally on regular patterns you'll have a line going as to what is the straight of grain. This one, I just know that it's going to be basically there is going to be your straight of grain. They are sleep shorts, so it's not terribly important that you have them exactly accurate. And then you're going to pin perpendicular to your outside edge, which means that your pins are going towards the outside edge. And you want to pin away from the center, and that helps pull all the fabric and your pattern out in that direction. And if you pin this direction, if by chance they are too long, you can pull them back as you go to cut, so that you don't end up hitting your scissors on your pins, because that is very hard on scissors. I'm just going to pin this on. And then we'll do the same with the other. Now this particular print has a direction to it, so you can see all the Canada is going up. So as a result, I don't want to do it this way, because then I would have the fronts would be upside down and the backs would be going right direction. So I want to just make sure that I'm putting my front on the same way. And you know what? I'm actually going to repin that last one, because I'm all about saving fabric as well, as you well know if you've watched any of the videos prior to this. So I'm going to go right out to this edge here. And it doesn't matter which direction your pattern is laying, whether it's going, whether you can read your writing or not, as long as you can see your lines to cut, that's all that really matters. I'm just going to move this one over, I'll repin it. Alright, now I'm ready to cut, and you can see I'll have this is on the fold, so I'm going to have a nice big piece left over for some quilting project in the future because this is all cotton fabric. I'm just turning it around so it makes it a little bit easier for me to cut. As I was saying about patterns, you can find any sleep short pattern, boxer short pattern, any of those will work. The one thing I don't do is I don't put the fly front in. That's a little more complicated, it's more advanced. So if you take the fly front out, then it makes it a much simpler short for a beginner sewer. Regrettably, I can't do this one as a free pattern, but any Simplicity, McCall's, Quick Sew, they all have short patterns there that you can get. And a future video I'll go through how to actually find patterns and how to size them properly, make sure they're the right size for you, and how to read a pattern. I'll just show you, this one did have a fly front on it right here, but you can see I just folded it over and pinned it, and then when I traced it without that fly front so it wouldn't complicate things. So then you just finish cutting it out. You want to make sure that you leave your fabric laying right on the table. You don't want to lift it off the table at all or it will warp it. So to the best of your ability, you want to leave it right there. And you want to just go around your curves. You don't want to warp your fabric going around your curves either. And just like that, I have 3 pairs of fronts cut out. Alright, and there you have 3 sets of backs cut out. Now you could pre-wash this fabric if you wanted to. I know that this is going to be a little bigger than it needs to be for my husband, so I am just going to leave it the way it is. And it will shrink a little bit, but that's all fine. They're sleep shorts. It will be just tickety-boo. Alright, we are ready to start sewing. Now I'm going to actually do this 2 different ways. I'll sew it on the sewing machine, and then I'll also sew it on the serger, a different one, so you can see both ways. So we're ready to start sewing our shorts. I have black thread on, so I'm going to start with the black pair of shorts. So I'll just put these aside, the fronts and the backs. And these are the ones we're going to work on. And then I'll put these guys aside also. Right. So at this point it's not so important that you actually know which is the fronts and which is the backs. All you really have to know is it takes one of one and one of the other has to go together. As long as you keep them like that. And then what I usually do is I will just flip this one over onto that one. And you can see that the crotch is going to line up and this is going to line up. Not with each other, the sides will, but... And then I take this one and put this one on top of it. So now we have our 2 sections. So if you're a pinner, this is where you would do some pinning. You're just going to pin, hold these together. So you're going to put pins along this edge, which is your hip edge. And again, you're putting them in perpendicular. You're just using them to hold it. So it keeps your edges together. And the other seam that we have to sew on these is this seam right here, which is just down the inside of your leg. So just one pin there, or you can put two if you feel like it. And then I'm going to do the same on the other leg. Alright, we are ready to sew. So normal sewing is done at 5/8 of an inch, which is usually the big long line that comes down on your throat plate and slide plate. And because it's clothing, I always like to backstitch for sure, because you don't always know if you're going to have more stitching go over it. So you do 2 or 3 stitches, you get your back stitch, might be over on the side of your machine, and then you go. And there's something wrong with my machine. And then back stitch again at the end. Now I like to chain stitch. So all I'm doing is I'm butting this up right against this other one, and then we start again. And I'm going to back stitch. Alright, and then we're going to go here, just do this short little seam. So this short little seam has a bit of a curve to it, and you're just going to, sorry I can't sew and talk at the same time. You're just going to ease it around. So I usually use my left hand to just kind of guide it to the left so it goes round in a curvishness. And then I use my right hand to just kind of hold it in place so that it doesn't go off of the marker line that we're working on. Alright, just like that we're done. 2 legs ready to go. And now what do we do with them is the question, and I will show you. We're going to take one of these legs. Oh, sorry, I got this part. I'm not on the serger. Okay, so we need to finish these edges so that they're not going anywhere, because otherwise they'll fray out. And cotton does fray quite a bit, and because these will be worn and washed frequently, we need to make sure that we finish the edges so they don't fray out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to zigzag, and I'm going to do fairly wide zigzag and fairly long stitches, and I'm just going to zigzag these edges that I just sewed. These you don't backstitch on. Always make sure you hang on to your belt when you start sewing. Alright. Always want to make sure you cut your threads so you don't have quite close to your edge, so you don't have a lot of loose threads that you have to clean up later. We're going to turn one of these legs inside out, just like that. So we've got that one, and then this one we're going to leave exactly the way it is. And we're simply going to take this turned right side out leg and put it inside the other one. So now we have right sides together again, and without even trying, we have the right things going together because we sewed them together in the first place, right? So I like to throw a few pins in here just to make sure that your edges are lining up properly. So that curve, we're going to have to be careful when we're sewing about the curve. And then down here, I like to put one going one direction, one going the other, so you don't have a really big bulky seam right in the middle of your crotch. Okay, so we're going to put it back to straight stitch, and we're going to straight stitch that all the way around. And again, at 5/8 of an inch, going to back stitch at the beginning and end, and you're going to hang on to your tails when you start sewing. That keeps it from sucking back up and making a big bird's nest underneath. You can see I've just used my finger to hold that tail as we start, and then it's fine. Alright, and then we'll zigzag that. Alright, and when you turn these inside out, just like that, you have a pair of shorts. So now all we have to do is clean finish the bottom and put the elastic in the top. So to clean finish the bottom, you're just going to turn it once and turn it a second time, and you can pin this if you want. I tend to just do it as I go. Again, these are sleep shorts, so it's not going to be a huge deal one way or the other if it's slightly bigger or slightly less. You're going to wear these in public, maybe that would be a different story. And then we've gone back to straight stitch. There. Electronic machines, they need to take an extra stitch after you switch them to get back to what they're supposed to be. So I like to usually start on a seam of some sort when I'm doing this, just so it doesn't show so much. And you're going to sew right along the inside edge so that it holds that fabric. And again, I like to back stitch on these guys, though you can just stitch over when you get to the end, and that would be fine too. And you simply go around and clean finish that edge. Then make sure you trim all the threads. There's going to be extra loose threads here. If you trim them as you're sewing, you won't have to go back later and try and find them all, especially if it's a black fabric like this where you can't see it very well. But you will definitely notice it if you're wearing them. Those loose threads will be quite annoying. So you're just going to go ahead and clean finish this other edge as well. Now if you were to pin, you would put your pins in, again, perpendicular, So you do the head down. Now I'm left-handed. If you were right-handed, you would be going this direction, putting your pins in that way. But that's how you would put your pins in. I'm just going to clean finish this other edge, and then we'll do the waistband. So this time I hadn't backstitched, so I held it in place to basically backstitch. I went further over the original and then held it in place. So it would take a few extra stitches. Again, I'm cleaning up all my loose threads now so I don't have to do it later. There we go. So they're clean finished. So now we're on to elastic. So elastic. I like to use the non-roll elastic, so it's got these ridges in it so it doesn't bend as easily. And the amount that you need is whatever the waist size is, minus 3 to 6 inches, depending on how much top stitching you're going to do on it. And I'll explain that all in a second here. It will become quite evident. So the first thing you have to do is you have to overlap your elastic and then zigzag on it to get it to stay together. And zigzagging seems to work best. If you try and do straight stitch, it will skip stitches, and zigzag, even if it skips, still seems to work a bit. Enough anyway. So again, hang on to your tails. And then you're going to go just back and forth over it. I like to go 2 or 3 times. Looks like this straight stitches when it goes backwards. That'll be enough. Trim your threads, all those loose ends. You want to make sure you've got them all trimmed. And then we're going to do this very cool trick. So we're going to fold our elastic in half. So our seam here, half is here. You're going to mark it with a pin. And you're going to fold it in half again. So those line up, and we've got it here. And this is now your quarters. You're going to put a pin in there. Unfold it, keeping it together. Fold it and put a pin in there. There you have your half and your quarters. And now we're going to take our shorts. Looks like I missed some long tails. And you're going to line this up with our seams. Now because these are boxer shorts or sleep shorts, they tend to be fairly even for size. Some things you have to actually fold them to find the half and the quarters, but this one is okay. So I'm just going to pin that right on those seams. And just have your seams go one way or the other. And ideally they'll match up with what you've done down below when you were clean finishing, but if they don't, that's okay too, unless you have a person who's like super sensitive to seams, then you have to be a bit more careful. Might actually have to flat fell these, like stitch down the seam on the side so that it becomes flatter. Okay, so now we've got the halves and quarters, and all we're doing now is we're going to stretch in between while we're stitching. So I'm just going to start here, and we're going to zigzag this on. I always like to get it, we're just zigzagging right along the edge here. Put your foot down, hold on to your tails, do a couple stitches so we've got it going. And I like to have the elastic on the top so I can see what's going on, I can see my stretching, and then we're just going to stretch in between. So this is very important that you have your left hand in behind and it's going to pull the same amount as the right hand. So we're pulling the same amount of tension on both sides and then we're just letting the feed dogs feed it through. Now I just have to stop and make sure that I might have to put a pin in there because it's definitely wanting to slip down. So just stretch it, figure out where you want your pin, stick it in there. There we go. And then that's going to hold that where we want it. And then again, we're just zigzagging, zigzagging right on the edge. And take that pin out. Now if your pattern called for a clean finish on the top or a casing of some sort, you might have to trim off a bit. My husband likes to have them a bit longer anyway, so that's not a problem here. And then we're just going to turn it back to straight stitch. We're going to flip this over. And we're going to put our needle in. We're going to go right along this edge, and again we're going to stretch in between our seams. But now you're sewing a straight stitch right along this edge, and that will give us our finish that we're looking for. So again, even tension, front and back. Trim all your threads. And there you have it. Now the one thing that you might need to do, and it just depends on how they sit, if you find that they're kind of pulling funny, you can do little snips in here. You want to go through your seam allowance but not through your stitching, and this will just ease that curve so it will lay nice and flat. Gives you a bit more fabric in that area that you're needing. And then they'll just lay perfectly. So there you have it. Alright, this pair we're going to put together with the Serger. So we're going to do the same as we did with the sewing machine. We're going to take our fronts and our backs. We're going to take the one and put it straight over on the other, just like that. And it's this side seam that we're sewing. I'm just going to put a pin just at the top so I know that's the seam I'm sewing. And another pin just at the bottom here, so I know that that's the other seam I'm sewing, which is the inside leg. And then I'm going to do the same. I'm just going to flip these together and do the same here. Now I just have black and navy thread on my serger because that's the project I was working on last, and these are sleep shorts. Nobody's going to see the insides of these. Nobody really cares. It's going to be dark all the time when somebody's wearing them. So I'm not going to bother switching it. So when you're serging, you have to take your pins out. Otherwise it will cut you'll hit it with your knife and that'll be a problem. And on your serger, there's usually some kind of lines. So depending on which needle you're using, which I've got the left needle in, so it'll be the inside set of lines, the big long one. And because this is meant for 5/8 inch seams, I'm going to have to actually cut off some of the fabric. So I'm going to try and guide this along that big long line that's on my serger. You'll have to check your serger to see what your guide is for the 5/8 inch. And you can take a ruler and find out what it is. I'm just going to get it started underneath here, so I know that the foot's got a hold of it, and I'll take my pin out. Now with sergers you always need to leave long tails. That's just a thing. And if you're having trouble getting it started, you can just pull on those tails and it will usually work its way out. Now if I'm serging, I usually don't bother pinning because it's just a pain to have to take them out again. So I just kind of eyeball it, and I try and keep my right hand is the one that's checking to make sure that I've got fabric on both sides, and my left hand is just doing the guiding, getting it so it's going in the right direction for the 5/8 of an inch seam. Now again, if it's a little bit wider, a little bit less, it's not a huge deal. These are sleep shorts. These are great projects to just practice on. And again, we're going to chain stitch these together. I'm actually just going to do the inside leg at the same time. So again, like before, I'm just going to get it started under the foot, and I'll take that pin out, straighten this all out, curve it around because this has a bit of a curve to it. Now on to our next leg. Again, get it started. I actually put a finger between the layers, so then I can shift them a bit if I need to. So when you go to finish, I usually give myself at least that much tail. You can cut it, or you hold it and flip it in behind and under the knife, and that does all your cutting for you. So now you're going to just snip in between here. And there you have, your legs are done. You're going to take one of these, turn them right side out. And then you're going to put your right side out leg inside your inside out leg. And then we're going to do this big long seam. So the only time you have to worry is, again, you're going to try and match your seams down here, and then that curve should just be okay. I'll just hold it with my fingers because that's going to be the runaway spot if there is any. You can throw some pins in, but just make sure you take them out before you get to them. And you're just guiding it. You're not pulling back, you're not pulling forward. Just let the machine do the work for you. Now the curve is a bit tricky, so you try and straighten that curve out a bit. And you're going to guide it around, trying to stay still on your mark there. And your seams, you want them to go different directions, so again, you don't have all that bulk at the seam. Now we're going up the other side here, so I'm just going to straighten that out a bit. up our fabrics, make sure we haven't got anything in underneath. And there we go. So just like that. How long did that take us? Not very long. Thread catchers are great because it catches all that cutoff that you're doing. You know, some of the new machines, actually, that's part of the feature, is that comes completely attached. You don't have to have a separate thread catcher. Now all we have to do is we're going to go around the bottom of our legs. Just serge the whole thing. And this is where, if you have an example here where one side is way longer than the other, why I'm not sure, we're just going to sew up to here and then trim and then just ease it out into where it should be. I don't know if you saw, but when I go on, you don't go straight on. You don't lift your foot ever with a serger. And here I'm just going to cut that off, and then I'm just going to ease it out ever so slightly. So now I've got this extra tail, so I'm going to actually hold that out. And when I sew, I'm going to sew across that and go a couple inches further and then just sew off, basically. You're going to sew right off the edge of that. So there I've crossed it. I've actually cut that tail off. We're going to sew a little bit further and off the edge. And then we're going to trim that right there. So now we have that edge finished. And then I'll do the same on this one. So watch carefully as I go on here. I'm actually going to angle it in, and then as soon as my knife gets to the fabric, I'm going to straighten it out. Again, we're going to go further than our stitching and then swing off. And then trim our threads. Got one other big thread right there. I'm going to cut that right now so I don't have to think about it. Alright, on to elastic. So the elastic, just like on the other one, you do 3 to 6 inches less, depending on how much top stitching you're doing, if any. And you're going to overlap. You're going to zigzag that on so that it will stay together. And 3 or 4 times back and forth. Back to the serger. So we're going to quarter in half our elastic. If you watched by the sewing machine one, you will already know what we're doing. If you didn't, this is what we're doing. We are going to fold it in half and mark the half. We're going to fold it again, and this will give us our quarters. Just like that. And then we're going to take those and line them up with our seams. So you want to put this on a seam. We're putting it on the inside. of the fabric. Not the right side, the wrong side of the fabric. And then we just line up those seams with our pins. Just like that. Now we're going to serge this on, and because we're using the serger, we have to pull those pins way back so that they don't get caught by the knife, and we are going to pull them out as we get to them, because otherwise the serger will get all hung up. But just in case we forget, at least those will be down there. Now the catch with this is you cannot cut the elastic with the serger knife. So we're going to swing onto here just like we did on the bottom edge. So I'm angling it in, and as soon as the knife gets to that outside edge, we're going to tip it so it's going the right direction. And our needles are now in the elastic, so that's good. And then we're just going to pull this gently. And we're going to skim that knife just along the fabric. If you take a little bit off, that's fine. And we're stretching, putting even tension front and back of that needle, of the actual sewing. I'm going to pull that needle out before we get to it. Stretch in between. Let the machine do the work. All we're stretching is the fabric. We're not pulling it through. We're not holding it back. We're simply stretching the elastic out. Coming to another needle, I'm going to take that out. Again, we're just going to stretch, guide it through. So now I've crossed where I was before. I'm just going to stitch off and cut that. Just like that. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch this down. You can clean finish the edge if you want, or leave it, whichever is fine. So we've got our sewing machine set up for straight stitch. I'm just going to get it going. We're going just off the edge here where our serging stitches are. We're going to fold it. Remember what I said about loose threads? We're going to fold it, and I'm going to fold it right where the next seam is. I'm going to stretch in between, guide it through. Go to the next one. One more. And there you have it. Now if you find that these are still too tight, then you can do another row of stitching right in the middle. I'll show you here. So right in here, you could do another row of stitching. And again, you're just going to start your stitching, and then you're going to pull in between and then stitch a line there. Now I'm actually not going to finish these. If I were going to, you don't have to do the double fold on these. You can just do a single fold, because it's basically a finished edge anyway. So you can just do a single fold and then stitch right along here. But I'm actually going to just leave them because they're sleep shorts and they look fine just the way they are. Alright, so on a 39-inch waist, I cut 34 inches of elastic. and then you lose a bit when you overlap it, and these fit perfect. So I won't do an extra row of top stitching, but if I cut it a little bit less, then it would have been too tight, so then I could have done a row of top stitching here just to show you what it looked like. But my husband is quite happy with these, and everything is great. So I've got 2 here that are completely done. Hope you liked our tutorial. Please like and subscribe. Leave me some comments. If there's things that didn't make sense, make sure you ask those in the comments, and I'll try and clarify them for you. If there's anything else that you want to see us build or have examples of, let me know and I'll try and do a tutorial on it. Thank you very much.